So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sylvain Charbonneau. I'm the Vice President Research at the University of Ottawa. Greetings to you, Dr. Panchanathan, Professor Vonortas, Professor Gatingers. Greetings to our distinguished guests and our fellow students. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you all who are virtually participating in this 2021 edition of the Bromley Memorial, either be from Washington, D.C., from our nation's capital in Ottawa, and many other places. Before we begin, allow me to pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardian of the land where the University of Ottawa is located. We acknowledge their long-lasting relationship with this territory, which remain to this day unceded. I am pleased that after 3 years, three-year hiatus, and thanks to the close collaboration between the George Washington University's Institute for International Science and Technology Policy and its counterpart here at the University of Ottawa, the Institute for Science, Society and Policy, under the leadership of the respective director, Nicholas Vonortas and Monica Gatinger, of course, we are able today to continue our conversation on Canada-US relations and science policy. In keeping with the Dr. John Delamotte's vision, this annual joint event will continue to reinforce the collaboration between our two nations and our academic institutions, and strive to inspire the next generations of scientists and science policy professionals. With the outbreaks of the global pandemic, the general public has been fed an incredible amount of scientific data over the past few months, often delivered by our country's top medical scientists. And as a matter of fact, it seems as though both the American Chief Medical Advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and our own Canadian public health officers, Dr. Teresa Tams, became household celebrities. Despite several voices, our fellow citizen turns even more to science and find answers, and become increasingly aware of how critical research is to shaping and implementing our government's policies, including strategies to overcome this pandemic. Bringing science and technology at the policy table to better inform science policies and to improve society is what most of you are working hard to accomplish. It is likely what inspired David Allen Bromley, a brilliant Canadian-born Yale physicist, after whom this event is named, a trailblazing director at the White House Office of the Science and Technology Policy during the Bush Senior Administration. His position mirrored that of Canada's Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Niemer, who happens to be my predecessor at the helm of the University of Ottawa VP Research Office. Building on our own wealth of talent, our strong vision for innovation and commitment to bilingualism, and our strategic access to national decision maker, research at the University of Ottawa aims to help our nations meet domestic and international challenges of the 21st century knowledge economy by informing and shaping public and science policy. Our strategic research approach prioritizes excellence, relevance, and impact, as well as interdisciplinarity, international collaboration, knowledge mobilization, and inclusion. It is largely carried out through our research and teaching centers and institutes, such as the ISSP, which enable rich student experience and build bridges across campus among the academic, public, private, and civil society sectors, while at the same time ensuring greater equity, diversity, and inclusion in research. EDI in research is precisely the subject addressed by our keynote speaker this evening, Dr. Panchanathan, the director of the NSF, who I am proud to inform you, for those of you who don't know, is also a distinguished University of Ottawa alumni and a former Faculty of Engineering professor. He is still fondly remembered by his colleague here at the university. We're all eager to hear his vision and ideas for building an inclusive science and engineering community that reflects the diversity of our society. So I will now turn things back over to Dr. Vonortas, who will and I wish you a very successful event. Thank you very much.
Professor Charbonneau, that was a great introduction. Excellent, excellent. Hello, everyone. I am Nick Vonortas. I am the director of the Institute for International Science and Technology Policy. If we could meet physically, the Institute would be the host of this event this year. Let me just say that I am responsible for having this event going on now for 16 years. And the reason is that my friend John Delamoth, many years ago, I think it was 2004, I'm sure it was 2004, came down to Washington and over a beer asked me whether it was appropriate to set up an event to honor this great Canadian scientist, a physicist and advisor to President Bush Sr. Of course, I knew Alan Bromley. I was a young professor already at GW when he was serving at the White House. The White House, his office is just 3 blocks away from mine. Of course, I knew him, and of course, right there, we decided we would do. Since then, this event has gone on more or less uninterrupted, with last year, I think, the exception. Because of the pandemic. It goes once in Ottawa, once in Washington, in alternates between the two capitals, and it is an event really that is supposed to show the close relationship between the two countries in North America. Close relationship, at least in science, technology, and innovation policy. So I'm truly happy to be here with you today. I will not take more of your time. I will follow the event very carefully, and in fact, our keynote speaker, of course, as Professor Charbonneau just said, is linked not only with the United States, but he is also a product of the University of Ottawa, our partner, and this is it was amazing that he accepted to give this keynote speech at this point in time. So without further discussion, I want to actually introduce our partner. This is Professor Monica Gatinger. She is the director of the Institute of Science, Society and Policy at the University of Ottawa. And this is the institute with which ours has been collaborating in organizing this event all along. Professor Gatinger is very well known for her work on the environment and advice to policy decision makers. So, Monica, I want to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. And rest assured, for those in the audience, we will be very shortly getting to the main event for today. Nick, it's been such a pleasure to work with you and with George Washington University. As Nick said, my name is Monica Gatinger. I'm director of the Institute for Science, Society and Policy. We're a cross-faculty institute at the University of Ottawa with 3 key themes. We explore science for policy, aka evidence-based or evidence-informed decision-making, policies for science, technology, and innovation, and governance of emerging technologies. And we have scholars and senior practitioners, multiple people in our networks that come together around that shared enterprise. I think it's been quite clear in the comments to date that it's a small world in science policy and science and technology issues across the Canada-US border. And, you know, for the Institute, the Bromley, as it is very affectionately known, is the highlight of the year for us. And no year, I think, could be more exciting than this year. You know, Canada-US science relations and Canada-US relations in general are back with a Biden administration in power, the government here in Canada of Justin Trudeau, very strong collaboration and agenda for collaboration between the two countries. It's extremely, extremely exciting. So I can hardly wait to hear what our guest speaker for today will share with us. Our moderator for today is Dr. Jeff Kinder. Jeff is a senior fellow at the Institute. Jeff is also executive director of science and innovation at the Institute on Governance, and I think really embodies the Bromley, an American living in Canada, having studied in both the United States and in Canada, and one of the country's very strong experts around issues of science policy and innovation. So, Jeff, I turn the floor over to you. It is now your show. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for that kind introduction. And my thanks to you and Nick, my old professor at GW, to Paul DeFore and all the organizers for including me in today's events. As you noted, this event does draw together several threads for me, both my affiliations at the University of Ottawa, as senior fellow in your institute, Monica, but also as a graduate or an alum of George Washington University and the Elliott School program there in S&T policy, but also my years at the National Science Foundation. So many threads tied together. I also remember well meeting Dr. Bromley at a talk he gave 30 years ago at the Smithsonian Institution. He was in his characteristic bow tie and ever the gentleman. He was, of course, a Canadian, as we've said, who lived and worked in the US and helped bridge the two science systems. As Monica indicated, I've come the other way as an American now working in Canada, and I've also long sought to help bridge the science policy communities between our two countries. So I'm very excited to be part of this afternoon's program. And finally, a thank you and a congratulations really to ST Global, which I think is an incredibly important opportunity for students from a wide range of institutions to come together and discuss their research. So kudos to ST Global. Just before I go further, I would also like to quickly acknowledge that I'm joining you from Ottawa, the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. So the beginning of a new administration is always an exciting time to be in Washington, and the Biden administration obviously has already taken many strong steps in science policy. Here in Ottawa, we're looking forward to the federal budget coming out next Monday, where innovation is expected to be a major focus. So today's event, I think, is very timely to explore these issues of science and innovation policy. In a moment, I'll introduce our keynote speaker, the director of NSF, and hopefully we'll be hearing a little bit about what's happening in the science policy arena down there in Washington. Then we'll hear from our two discussants, Celeste and Brennan, students from U of O and GW respectively. After that, we'll open up the discussion to include questions from you, the audience. So please be thinking of what you would like to ask, and feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A function. We'll get to as many of them as we can during this session. As we approach the 6 o'clock hour, I'll draw the discussion to a close and introduce Dr. Ayers, the Dean of the Elliott School, who will deliver some closing remarks, and we should wrap up around 6 p.m. So without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the Honorable Sethuraman Panchanathan, Director of the National Science Foundation, who thankfully goes by Panch. Panch has a distinguished career in science, technology, engineering, and education, spanning many decades, including serving as Executive Vice President of the Arizona State University Knowledge Enterprise, where he also founded the Center for Cognitive Ubiquitous Computing. Panch has served on the National Science Board. He's a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors, the AAAS, the Association for Computing Machinery, and many other prestigious organizations. His research has advanced person-centered ubiquitous computing technologies for empowering individuals with a range of abilities. And as you've heard, he has relationships on both sides of the border. So Panch, couldn't think of a better person to deliver this keynote address. Thank you for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm delighted to be with all of you. Thank you, Sylvain, for a beautiful introduction, as well as to Nick and Monica. It is truly a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm just going to fire up my slides here. And so just bear with me for 1 second on the Zoom screen here. So let me do that, and then I will be with all of you. And so let me do something that's probably okay. And I want you to tell me if it's all looking good. Are you all able to see my slides?
Looks good.
Yes, we are.
Great. And you will see me probably in the slides too. So bear with me. I didn't mean to be overwhelming my presence at all levels. but just thought that you might be interested and intrigued as a computer scientist, showing off a little bit that I can do something different and unique. So first of all, before I dive into this, I tell you, this is like a homecoming to me. What better homecoming can you ask for when your three homes are all converging together? The first home, Canada, which gave me who I am today in terms of higher education opportunities and my first foray into academia and research. I'm ever grateful to the University of Ottawa, a fantastic institution, a great friends, Sylvain and Dr. Gilles Patry. I'm sure in the audience here, a dear, dear friend and an amazing intellect who I'm proud to call as a friend. And then Dr. Mona Niemer, again, a fantastic friend, an amazing intellect. Again, I'm going to keep repeating this. And Dr. Alejandro Adam, and many, many, many friends and my colleagues at the University of Ottawa. It's truly a pleasure, to be amongst you and to come back home, if you may, virtually. And then I have my second home, which is Phoenix, Arizona State University, which is a partner. And that is truly a delight to see my second home also represented. And then coming to the third home, which is my real physical home right now, namely the Washington, D.C. DMV area, represented by George Washington University, Georgetown University, University of Maryland College Park, University of Virginia, and not too far, Virginia Polytechnic, University of Virginia. And I tell you, what more can you ask for when all your three homes and the universities are all joining together and co-sponsoring this event? And even more exciting then is the fact that we have a person that I consider a pioneer, a role model for many, whom we are celebrating today, Alan Bromley. And so truly a pleasure to be with all of you. So now I'm going to dive into the presentation and see if I can keep it to my 35 minutes allocated time here. I'm going to discipline myself as much as I can. Truly a pleasure to be with all of you. So thanks to University of Ottawa, George Washington University, and I want to congratulate the organizers from both institutions who worked to make this event happen virtually. This has been a year of enormous disruptions. We all know that. So I commend you for making it possible for us to continue this tradition of honoring Dr. Alan Bromley. I'm thrilled to be here today to highlight the ongoing importance of Dr. Bromley's legacy and what it means for science and engineering enterprise, public policy, and the future of United States, Canada, and other nations. I'm so excited to be here to talk about the role of science and technology in our society at a time that resonates with Dr. Bromley's own career. So today I thought I will choose this topic of advancing the frontiers of research, building a more inclusive science and engineering enterprise. What better topic to talk about as you find this theme being science at service, being inclusive, building inclusive communities, perfectly aligned for the position that we are in today, hopefully post-COVID soon. I'm also very happy that it is being co-sponsored with the US National Academies. So let me start off by saying a little bit about the history of NSF. Some of you may know this already, but I'm going to talk about a little bit about the history of NSF. And it was founded in 1950 by a great pioneer again, Vannevar Bush, who laid the foundation for NSF. And so he said that NSF is something that's going to post-World War II make possible through this mission of what we call promoting progress of science, the advancement of national health and prosperity and welfare, and securing the national defense, where he said that a transformational shift in the relationship between federal government and the research community has to be birthed. Federal research became a government priority at the same level as national defense, economic stability, healthcare, and social well-being. But the effect was even more profound than that, because investments in fundamental research are not just priorities next to other national objectives. In fact, fundamental research is an engine of progress that drives the success of national priorities like defense, health, and economic growth. So that's the important thing that we need to keep in mind here. It is not an augmentation, but it's almost like a fundamental platform. We all know better than any time than today the importance of the scientific enterprise, that it is critical to our national health and prosperity. And when I say prosperity, I don't mean just economic prosperity. In fact, I mean societal prosperity that comes from people and communities having access to technology and applications that science and engineering enable. At the heart of the research enterprise are the people who are part of the science and engineering community. We are on the threshold of revolutionary development in science and engineering because NSF and NSERC on the Canadian side and other agencies have been investing in people and their ideas, in the case of NSF, for over 7 decades. So the vision that I'm going to share with you today is how we take NSF's mission and advance it to the future. As I came into this role in July of last year when I was sworn in, I laid out this vision that I'm going to share with you today. And I'm so excited because this vision is consistent and coherent and highly synergistic with the National Science Board Vision 2030. I was part of the National Science Board. In fact, I chaired the Committee on Strategy when President Obama appointed me in 2014. I served 6 years in the National Science Board, watching NSF evolve during those years, as well as it is synergized very, very well with the new administration, President Biden's 4 pillars: the COVID-19, economic recovery, racial equity, as well as climate change. There is a perfect synergy between all the visions coming together. In fact, my vision for NSF birthed out of my participation in the NSB 2030 vision, as well as the parameters that I've been laying out in my previous role at Arizona State University, as well as a talk that the Senate Commerce Committee asked me to give, even before I was nominated to this role, on how United States can be in the vanguard of research and innovation. I outlined certain pillars at that time. So this is a synergized thinking of all of that. So we are at a unique moment where decades of growth in our scientific knowledge and engineering capabilities have placed us in a unique position where we are going to be able to accomplish so much more moving forward. And the COVID moment has demonstrated the importance of science, the importance of technology, just shown what science and technology can do. It can actually deliver vaccines in a short time of 8 to 9 months. Isn't that fantastic, folks, to celebrate this moment of how science, engineering, technology, and policy is making amazing things possible? What better moment can we ask for then building on that and delivering for the future? And that's where we are here today. So how do we move forward from this defining moment, right? I say there are 3 features of this defining moment, notwithstanding the COVID moment that I have shared with you. This is a moment which is defined by global competition like we have never seen before. I always say, since when has global competition been anything other than bringing out the excellence in every one of us, inspiring us, motivating us, driving us to do better than ever before? So that's what this moment is calling for. Contrary to what people might think, that this global competition is pitting one against the other, I look at this global competition as motivating every one of us, everywhere, to do better than we have ever done before, for our nations as well as global prosperity. But at the same time, all of us are facing this important challenge. That's what I define as missing millions. For far too long, we have left too much of our talent behind. Talent in the broad socioeconomic demographic of our society. Talent that is across the broad geographical diversity of our nations. And this can be said about every nation. United States for sure, Canada for sure. Any nation that is advancing science and technology progress can rightly say that we have not done everything that we can to be inclusive in terms of talent across the socioeconomic demographic, across the gender demographic, racial demographic, across the geographic demographic, that we have to be inclusive in every form of every kind. And that's what society is demanding of us today. The other part that makes this a defining moment, I just testified to the Senate, the Appropriations of Commerce, Justice, Science Committee on Tuesday. Yesterday morning, I did a 2-hour testimony to the House Commerce, Justice, Science Committee, again, Appropriations Committee. I spent 2 hours testifying to them. Just coming out of those testimonies, I have walked the halls of Congress before COVID hit, and now I have swung my chair from the left to the right, talking to many senators, House members, as well as staffers, as well as administration members. I can tell you with certainty, there is true bipartisan support for science, engineering, technology moving forward. There is true bipartisan support. And I am sure, and I'm confident, talking to Mona Niemer, talking to Gilles Patry, talking to Alejandro Adam and others, and we know that that is the case in Canada too. That everybody believes that science, technology, and engineering is leading the way and is going to lead the way. Now, this unique moment, therefore, as I said, we should seize this unique moment and see what we can do for humanity and society as we move forward. And so as I lay my vision, I lay that vision with this backdrop of opportunity. And the three pillars that I've outlined, the first pillar is advancing the frontiers of research into the future. NSF has always done that over the last 7 decades. The only thing I tell people is that we now have to strengthen at speed and scale. Strengthen at speed and scale. This moment calls for us to do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. The central pillar, the central pillar of my vision is ensuring accessibility and inclusivity. I cannot say this better. As I have said a little while earlier, we need to make sure that broadening participation and building inclusive communities is critical to unleashing all of the progress that is capable across the range of fundamental research. I'm going to talk to you about some more specific ways that NSF is thinking about strengthening talent in STEM fields and broadening participation. But I want to take a moment to highlight some of the ways that we are working to break down the barriers in science that have kept people out of the research community. But before I get to that, the third pillar, the pillar of securing global leadership. I have said, by global leadership pillar, I am not implying that one is a leader and somebody else is a follower. Instead, what I'm saying is that all of us lead by our shared values, shared aspirations, trust, reciprocity, research integrity. For those who share in these beliefs, we lead by those values. And therefore, this global leadership is a shared imperative. And I'm so delighted that United States and Canada have these shared values, shared aspirations of openness, transparency, reciprocity, research integrity, and more. And that's why we are strong partners. Notwithstanding the fact that Jeff came from here to Canada, I came from Canada to here, notwithstanding Alejandro Adam went from United States to Canada after his study at Princeton and then to UBC, notwithstanding Gilles Patry from Davis moving back to Canada. That's what makes this a fantastic community of scholars moving back and forth seamlessly, contributing to the global purpose. In this case, the strong partnership between Canada and the United States. And isn't it so rich and celebratory of what Alan Bromley himself exemplified in terms of a Canadian serving as the science advisor to President George H.W. Bush and doing the amazing things that he did in his life. And that's what can be made possible through this mindset of shared global leadership. When you look at these three pillars, the foundation for me of these three pillars is partnerships. I told somebody the other day, I think I was even sharing it in the testimony with the House members. I told them, if you were to take my DNA apart, there is one thing that you'll find in my DNA. That is partnership, 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 partnership. That's what my DNA is. I firmly believe that is the way we make rapid progress. As I said, strengthening at speed and scale. So when I look at the future of research, advancing the frontiers of research into the future, there are many components to that. We clearly won't have the time to go through all of them. But I can tell you that one of the fundamental tenets of what NSF is defined by is curiosity-driven research. I call it curiosity-driven, discovery-based exploratory research. That is the bedrock of NSF. That is what it inspires. That's what makes our mission really unique and supports that work across our nation. All the potential benefits of science, technology, and engineering that we see today are driven by the unbelievable power of discovery and curiosity-driven research. The way NSF does, I talked about breaking the barriers a little while earlier. The way NSF breaks barriers is through a multi-pronged and evidence-based approach. It is comprised of reinforcing efforts and it is never standing still as NSF collects new information and responds to new challenges. This is especially valuable in a country that is complex and diverse. We have a program that gives research awards on the science of broadening participation. Our results demonstrates what I call the diversity dividend, that more diverse groups are more creative, come up with a wide range of successful ideas, processes, and products. Businesses with diverse leadership last longer. The tremendous diversity of the United States is a national asset and a force multiplier. I shared this also with the House Committee yesterday. So therefore, NSF's approach to broadening participation is not just through funding certain areas of research. We are taking a holistic approach and are continually working to improve inclusivity and reduce bias in our review process by requiring our review panelists to take training on implicit bias and how it can affect the review process. For example, recently, we took the leadership role in tackling sexual harassment. In 2018, we created a new term and condition for NSF awards that is designed to combat sexual harassment. This measure helps combat sexual harassment by drawing a line of accountability between the actions and behaviors of researchers and NSF funding. Sexual harassment and other abuse by researchers to operate with NSF funds will not be tolerated, whether in the research environment or elsewhere. We want to lead by our values of integrity. And we are also looking to ways of how to address systemic racism and identify remaining barriers through a newly established racial equity task force. This is one of the first things I did when I came to NSF. The first 2 weeks at NSF, I launched the racial equity task force last July. I told the task force, I am charging you with identifying barriers of equitable treatment and providing recommendations on how to overcome those barriers in the areas of recruitment of future employees and in our programs to include policy guidance and procedures and merit review process and external NSF engagement. So I repeat, curiosity-driven research, like the wonderful image that you see from our DKIS telescope in Hawaii, that made the front page of the news in New York Times last year. Thrilling to see the sun's surface, the photo of the sun's surface. Lot more work to be done. DKIS is not even commissioned yet. Already we are seeing the tremendous benefits of this telescope, and NSF's facilities are fantastic. I've personally visited the South Pole, Antarctica McMurdo Station, and I've seen in action what our researchers do there in very harsh environments. I have visited Chile and looked at the telescopes there, the radio astronomy telescopes, as well as the optical telescopes of the future. They are fantastic facilities. That's what we make possible, again, with partnership with Canada. And this is what makes possible when we come together, we can do greater things for the greater good of humanity. The next thing that I want to talk about as a motivating force is what I call emerging opportunities. COVID-19 is an excellent example of an emerging opportunity, right? It's a challenge, but every challenge is an opportunity for us to do better, to bring the best and the brightest ideas out in the front. And so the race to understand and combat the coronavirus has been called the world's most important science project. That refers not only to medical research funded by entities like the NIH, but to a wide range of challenges that come with a global pandemic. How can we use 3D printing to rapidly produce protective equipment and ventilators? Guess what? Our 3D printing is an outcome of our funding in 1970s in terms of additive manufacturing. Today it is, mainstream. How do we study the transmission of the virus to environmental systems like waterways? What social and behavioral changes do people undergo in a pandemic? And how do we design better public health policies using that knowledge? These are just some of the questions that NSF has tackled through our rapid research programs and other funding mechanisms over the past year. I tell you, I look at some of the work that is done in this COVID, and I can take another 5 hours to tell you how excited I am by the projects that NSF has made possible, not only through decades of investment, but more importantly, to the rapid and eager grants for immediate response to the moment at hand. The COVID-19 pandemic also illustrates another way that NSF is flexible and responsive. As a result of the public health emergency, fewer faculty positions are being offered and filled, both in the US and Canada. So NSF is placing a priority on supporting postdoctoral opportunities. We need our talent to continue to advance their ideas. We are responding to these unique circumstances by creating opportunities for people who have finished their PhDs to continue on their career track, even when the hiring conditions have made that difficult. In fact, I spoke recently, just last week, with the leaders of the tribal nations at a town hall on how to better consult with tribal nations and indigenous peoples on their research. One of the important messages that came out of that meeting was how COVID-19 has disproportionately affected tribal communities. I'm sure that's the case in Canada too. So building an inclusive research force is critical for identifying areas where science and engineering can have a big impact in improving people's lives. We have to do a lot better, a lot more. So I have charged the entire leadership of NSF to look at how we might respond. And I'm so grateful to the American Rescue Plan, to the Biden administration and Congress for giving NSF $600 million in addition to what I committed to doing as part of our regular budget, so that we might serve this need at hand right away, take care of our disproportionately affected individuals and institutions right away. Talking about other exemplars of what we can do, research centers. NSF has over 60 research centers right now across our nation. Engineering research centers, science and technology centers, material science engineering research centers, we call them MERSECs, physics frontier centers, chemical innovation centers, and a whole lot more. These centers bring together ideas and talent across disciplines, institutions, and partners that result in strong curiosity-driven research and translational outcomes, both at the same time. Our investments in research centers help create lasting environments that foster new generations of students and researchers. An important part of NSF approach to research centers is a deliberate focus on creating opportunities for underrepresented communities. Underrepresented communities to participate in research and educational opportunities. So research centers are not just places to build new technology, as important as it is. They're actually doorways into science and engineering. And we need to always be thinking about how we can widen those doorways and show people the way in. That's what these centers should do as the fundamental spirit and core of what we need them to focus on. Now, there are many, many other activities. When you talk about the engineering research centers, just look at the titles of just the recent solicitation that we received. We funded 4 major research centers in. Just look at the titles. If that does not communicate to you how scientists and technologists and engineers are working together to actually take hold of real world problems and find solutions to them, what will? And I'm so proud of what our scientists and engineers are doing across our nation and in partnership with countries like Canada. And now when I came into the agency, I said the AI initiative that was in place, and my own research is AI and computing. I said AI cannot be just limited to only a few states of the nation, as important as it is. AI has to be in every state of the nation. I don't mean by that there will be the same identical way in which everybody reacts to the AI. We need AI talent inspired everywhere across this great nation. We need AI ideas energized everywhere across the nation, whether it is in K-12, community colleges, 4-year colleges, research universities, industry, entrepreneurial ecosystems. It doesn't matter what they are. We have to have the AI inspiration everywhere. I'm proud to say the first 7 institutes that were launched has 20 states participating in it. And the next 8 institutes that we have put the call out, and I'm so proud to say again on that front, we have the partnership of Amazon, Google, Accenture, and Intel. When I talk about partnerships, and those partnerships, along with Department of Transportation, Department of Homeland Security. In fact, in the first 7 AI institutes, 2 of them were in partnership with USDA, Department of Agriculture, NIFA, about smart agriculture. That's what we need to do. In addition to fundamentals of AI, we should be looking at problems that have to be solved. One of the AI institutes out of the University of Oklahoma is focused on weather. And in Colorado, the future of learning. So that's how we need to move our assets and ideas forward. So the next 8 competition that is about to get fully underway in terms of the proposals that have been submitted, I have challenged ourselves that AI institutes have to be inclusive and be in every state, every region of our nation. And that AI is just but one example of that. AI can be replaced by anything, that it has got to be inclusive. It has got to serve everywhere to the spirit of what we are talking about in this conversation that we are having today. So this is what, and I will not rest until this happens. And then let's take another area where we are working together on, quantum. Quantum is another industry of the future that will need to be a national priority in scope. How do we develop a national quantum platform? I said the national quantum platform that should connect to every region of the country. It cannot be for only parts of the regions of our country. There are places in the country with great talent, but quantum opportunities seem very far away for them. How do we bridge the gap? How can an 8th grader who's excited in rural Montana about science get to experience the mysteries of quantum revolution? If we are not working at that level, what are we doing? Talking about inclusion. So one important point I want to make about quantum research. While NSF is a major source of investment for quantum research, there are other agencies that are bigger sources of funding. So we are partnering with DOE, for example, in terms of these quantum opportunities and with industry. I will not have time to go through all of this, so I'm going to rush through my slides here. And right behind my head, it's not that I'm a resilient person, is resilience. Resilience is a conceptualization. I said when I came in that I want that this moment of COVID, we should be building resilient futures for our nation. How can we be resilient to pandemics of the future? How can we be resilient to the natural hazards of the future? How can we be building a resilient economy and society? So let's bring all our assets together at NSF across all directorates and bring them together and see how we can address resilient futures. How might we then look at biotech and bioeconomy of the future? When we think about resilience, I want to be very clear. It is also about thinking about the communities we are serving. The needs of the coastal communities are different from the needs of the communities in the heartland. So we have to be thinking about everywhere in resilience. Biotech and bioeconomy, I don't have to go into greater detail than to illustrate the importance of every aspect of the futures of the industries of the future. This moment, the COVID moment, has caused enormous upheaval for students around the world. But at the same time, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I can tell you it is not an oncoming train, fortunately. This is shining light on both the challenges and opportunities for learning everywhere. How do we scale knowledge platforms so that learners can grow and thrive no matter where they are? This challenge has shown that the opportunity of pivoting and making sure that learning everywhere is possible at quality. This is an enormous question for how we build technology and how we design educational methodologies and how we integrate social and behavioral knowledge at every level so that we can enhance and enrich outcomes. And that's what this moment is showing us. And then, last but not the least, that is very, very central to what we are talking about today, that through everything that we do, we think about how our work can enhance society. By expanding our knowledge of human behavior, economics, social sciences, policy, how we can better understand how we can design systems and policies that can have a meaningful impact on improving people's well-being, increasing the efficiency of systems we use every day, and strengthening our communities. By understanding the human element, we also make it possible to deploy science and technology more effectively and more ethically. More ethically, I underscore that. So that the benefits of AI or biotechnology or any other technology can be realized by everyone. Again, these cannot be afterthoughts. These cannot be afterthoughts, but integral to the thinking of how we advance science and technology. That's why I'm so excited by the institutes, ISSP and the institute in George Washington. This is the best thing that we can do for humanity and society, so that we don't get carried away by technology only. And that we share inspirations and we build the futures. Now, when I look at all of this circles you'll see here, you may think that each of them belong to a particular directorate. I can assure you they are all cross-directorate. If you look at the logo of NSF in the middle, as progress of seven decades of NSF, this logo is going to expand and make, through all of these exemplar initiatives and more, progress into the future. And as we think about that expansion, now I want to turbocharge that. That's not enough. When I talk about strengthening at speed and scale, that just is not enough. We've got to do even more. And I'm challenging ourselves to see how we can strengthen at speed and scale by having this, what I call megatons of rocket propellant, supercharging and taking us at speed and scale. And one of them, in terms of people, is the first supercharger. How do we take talent everywhere across all communities? And one of my key priorities is to see how we can scale up the reach of broader STEM community so that anyone from any background and from any part of the country, I repeat, who has a talent or desire to go into STEM is given the opportunity to do so. There are many, many programs at NSF. I will not have time to go through all of them, but I want to draw attention to this missing millions. This is not an acceptable future for us. It cannot be how we progress in terms of gender, in terms of race, ethnicity, and other demographics being left behind. This is not an acceptable future for any one of us. So the missing millions, or making the invisible visible, is a top priority for me personally, and has been a priority for NSF. And I'm trying to supercharge that everywhere. Supercharge that with many, many programs that we are launching, which we already have, and broadening them, or launching new programs in consultations with our scientific community. As you know, broadening participation has been an agency-wide focus at NSF. In 2016, the agency made inclusivity as one of the 10 big ideas for the future of investment when it launched the Includes Initiative, a large-scale program of alliances that are building collaborative infrastructure to accelerate the spread and finding innovative solutions for inclusivity. One of the programs of Includes I want to highlight is iGen, Inclusive Graduate Education Network. This is a partnership of 30 scientific societies, institutions, organizations, corporations, and national laboratories that are committed to increasing the number of Black, Latino, and Indigenous students who receive bachelor and doctoral degrees. At the same time, retention is equally important. We need to sustain students from underrepresented groups on their educational journeys. We know that women and Black and Latinx students leave STEM majors at a higher rate. And we know that they are also more likely to leave academic tracks rather than go on to pursue graduate degrees, postdocs, or early career positions. So one of the ways in which we address that is through Louis Stokes' Alliances for Minority Participation, LSAM program. Again, I will not have time to go through all of this. I apologize. But I'm going to go to the next supercharging element of our thinking, which is partnerships, I told you, which is my DNA. How do you build partnerships inside the agency, break down barriers, intra-agency partnerships? So we are doing a lot of things in terms of the big ideas, like climate change, for example. How do we bring together? Climate change is not a problem that can be solved only by the Geo Directorate, but by bringing together Geo Directorate, Bio Directorate, Engineering Directorate, SCIES, Computing Information Sciences Engineering Directorate, Social Behavioral Sciences Directorate, Mathematical Physical Science Directorate, and more. Our Education Human Resource Directorate. Everybody coming together and working together in terms of building the future, solutions, as well as interagency partnerships. The first 2 weeks when I got to NSF, I picked up the phone and talked to every leader of every agency. Just last week, I spoke to Secretary Granholm, Secretary of the Department of Energy, good friend. And then I'm also speaking to Secretary Ramondo, Commerce Secretary, to make sure that we are building these relationships. This morning, I had a meeting with our Undersecretary in Homeland Security, constantly talking to people to build bridges, because we need to be working together more than ever in order for us to advance on these ideas. Partnerships, 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 literally breaking the ice with partnerships. And then industry partnerships. I tell you, the COVID moment has given us this opportunity, at least given me the opportunity. I swivel my chair from right to left. I go from California to Maine. I'm talking and having listening sessions with Google, with Amazon, with Ford, with companies, asking them, how can NSF work with you better to build more programs? And you're going to see the president's budget just last week, the outline you have seen, a proposal that is based on the vision that I have laid out, is birthing a new directorate of technology, which is really a cross-cut directorate across all these directorates, so that we might take the strengthening at speed and scale by leveraging, energizing, and translating at the same time technologies through innovation and partnerships. Of course, in partnerships, it's foundations, philanthropy. I have a lot of conversations with foundations and philanthropy. K-12, community colleges, universities. Just on Monday, I'm going to be talking to the AAU presidents and chancellors, talk to the APLU. I've been asked to come to the U15. I most certainly love to do that. I've done that in the past. These are partnerships that are exceedingly important for us to work on, our partners. And to top it all, the international partnerships. I've had the good fortune of chairing the science advisors across the globe. and having the conversation with Mona Niemer and the counterparts across the globe, talking about COVID-19, which is the problem right at hand, but also setting the stage for how we might work on problems like AI, quantum, climate change, and other grand challenge problems that we can work together and do more. Again, this is a great focus for us in terms of how we might build futures by bringing our ideas together. So international partnerships can be powerful platforms for discovery. We have many great examples of how we can empower breakthroughs. And as I said before, Canada is an important partner in this partnership horizon that we have is a very, very important partner. There are many examples of that right here. You have Banff in the background. And Banff in the background because the Banff International Research Station for Mathematical Innovation and Discovery is a great partnership, joint venture between the United States, Mexico, and Canada that hosts over 2,000 scientists every year to support collaboration and discovery in the mathematical sciences. As I said, the chief science advisors working together on the COVID-19 pandemic and sharing data and information and approaches and how we might work together to build better futures, more resilient futures. I also participate in the Global Research Council with Alejandro Adam. Again, a great platform across the globe working together. I've had many meetings with ambassadors and leaders of agencies, UKRI, Madam Odeline, with Ireland, Mark Ferguson, you name it. With Japan, I was the ambassador's residence the other day, talking about what we might do even more at strengthening at speed and scale with ambassador of Italy, ambassador of Japan, ambassador of India, ambassador of New Zealand, and a whole host of others. Just how might we build stronger partnerships at the international scale, which is exceedingly important. All our facilities are through those excellent partnerships. Clearly, Canada and US have strong partnerships in AccelNet, NSF's accelerating research through international network-to-network collaborations program. This program is tackling grand challenges that require significant coordinated international efforts. It builds strategic linkages between US research networks and complementary networks in other nations to leverage research and educational resources in ways that accelerate the progress of science and learning. The AccelNet program has issued several awards with Canadian connections in a range of different fields. One project, for example, is strengthening collaborative networks in brain-inspired computation, exploring new approaches to intelligent system design that draw on AI systems modeled on how biological brains work. It is also addressing the social, legal, ethical dimensions of AI. Remember, that's an exceedingly important thing to keep in mind whenever we build these big platforms for technological progress. We have been active participants along with Canada on the Gender Working Group of the Global Research Council. So I can tell you, with Canada, amongst all of this, to the spirit of what we are discussing today, inclusivity is another area where NSF is making investments with our international partners. There have been 2 bilateral workshops on diversity funded by NSF and our Canadian counterpart, NSERC. These workshops bring together representatives from academic institutions, funding agencies, editorial entities, and other stakeholder communities to examine how to reduce barriers at the intersection of sex, gender, and diversity. By including these considerations in research, design, and analysis, we are improving research practices and outcomes in support of inclusivity. In 2019, NSF supported a workshop focused on bringing more diverse cohorts of undergraduates into international research. The 2-day workshop brought together a set of STEM faculty that have been successful in developing sustainable research abroad programs with a focus on recruiting underrepresented undergraduate students. Their work resulted in a report detailing many different aspects of how to improve participation with recommendations for students, faculty, academic institutions, non-governmental organizations, and industry. In conclusion, I will talk about, of course, the last part, which is the translational megaton of rocket propellant. When I came to NSF, I said the NSF DNA should be described as follows. I made it up. The NSF DNA is curiosity-driven, discovery-based exploratory research called exploration. That is the one strand, synergized and symbiotic with the other strand, which is use-inspired, solutions-focused translations or innovations. NSF's history has always been how do you intertwine and have the synergistic relationship. And that's what we are going to build at strength, at speed, and scale as we move into the future. There are many, many examples of that. I won't have time to go through this. Many, many examples of that, of this symbiotic nature. When we launched the investments in economics and sociology research in the 50s and 70s, and we funded the digital libraries initiatives in 94, In 98, Google founded, Google was founded in the PageRank algorithm. Google, in fact, was a digital libraries project. And in fact, the final report of Google said, we are launching a company called Google. NSF, Google, and IBM formed this Clue. And NSF, Google partnerships on big data and AI institutes now. We are constantly moving this forward. This is one example of thousands and thousands of examples. That's what we need to see, this strong synergy between the DNA of exploratory and translation or innovation. Knowledge leads to action. We all know that. And there are many, many programs. I'm not going to go into the details in the interest of time. I know I've passed time already. I've gotten too excited. But I will tell you the I-Core program, which is launched, has about 1,500 different folks who have gone through the boot camp, including myself. I was an I-Core PI. The most enriching experience for me as an entrepreneur to be. But then, now I'm talking about that should not be thousands, it should be hundreds of thousands of I-Core projects through our technology directorate that we are talking about, and many, many more. I've said that we need to build innovation ecosystems everywhere across our great nation around thematic topics that is most appropriate for that region. If it is Iowa or Kansas or Nebraska, where would you put an agriculture of the future center than there? That is the living laboratory. That's where we should birth an entrepreneurial ecosystem and industrial ecosystems around that. So every region of our nation has to be supercharged by building the innovation ecosystems. I called it the Bell Lab-like entities everywhere across the nation. And this is getting a lot of traction, again, with partnerships and building the innovation ecosystems. I won't have time to go through that, unfortunately. This DNA of exploration and translation, we are going to see how we can strengthen it at speed and scale. At the start of my talk, I mentioned how NSF establishment represented a fundamental shift in the relationship between federal government and the research enterprise. When Dr. Bromley was appointed as President George W. Bush's science advisor with a prominent role in the White House and in shaping the administration agenda, that was another advance in the relationship between the research community, and the federal government. Science and engineering, we know, are critical tools for understanding some of society's greatest challenges and for generating innovative and creative solutions. We have talked about that. And the core driver of all our progress in discovery and innovation are the people that make up the science and engineering enterprise and the STEM community. We are going to accomplish unbelievable things in the coming years. And every big breakthrough and every leap forward is going to be made possible because we are investing in people and strengthening our community by making it more inclusive. We are going to be bringing in talent from wherever the talent can be found. It exists everywhere. We are going to create STEM pathways to communities that have tremendous contributions just waiting to be unleashed. So thank you all for being part of the commitment to reaching the full talent and full potential of the great nations of the United States and Canada. I'm excited for all the great things that we are going to accomplish together. I know I'm not as energetic as I should be, and I'm thrilled that we will be on that journey together. So thank you for this opportunity to be with all of you today. I look forward to engaging with you. And most importantly, I'm so thrilled that we have two students, Celeste and Brennan, giving their remarks. I mean, what a way of honoring Alan Bromley's legacy. So thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this great legacy of Alan Bromley and to reconnect back with my three homes converging together in this unique way. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Okay, thank you, Panch. That was awesome. You've given us a lot to chew on. Frankly, to hear a director of NSF talking about missing millions, broadening participation, empowering society, international partnerships, this is quite refreshing. So thank you very much. But let's get to our discussants. So let me just quickly introduce both of them, and then they can make their remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. So again, if you do have questions, go ahead and start entering those in the Q&A function, and we'll get to those after the discussants' comments. So Celeste De Giovanni is a second-year PhD candidate in environmental geography here at the University of Ottawa, where her research focuses on the collaborative management of fisheries off the west coast of Vancouver Island. Celeste works as a policy analyst at our Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. She has a passion for translating knowledge amongst and between groups for better and more informed natural resources management, and I'm particularly pleased to see this passion for knowledge mobilization as well as knowledge generation. Our second discussant will be Brennan Hoban. Brennan is completing her master's in international S&T policy at the Elliott School, where she studies the intersection of economic and technology policy with a focus on place-based innovation policy, something that's a highly relevant topic as we talk about clusters and other things of that sort. Brennan also currently works at McKinsey, has been at the Brookings Institution, Interaction, and has interned for the State Department in Rome. She studied Urdu and in her spare time volunteers at the National Press Club. Apparently she doesn't need sleep. So welcome, Celeste and Brennan. Celeste, over to you first.
Hi, Dr. Gatinger. Thank you so much for that introduction, and Dr. Ponch for a fantastic speech. It's very enlightening. Considering the brevity of the time that we have here, I'll get started. So when I started in science policy, I was not convinced that my research interests aligned. When I thought of science, ecotoxicology, oceanography, physics, that's what came to my mind. Why I do belong here became clear to me when I was defending my comprehensive exams. I was speaking to the applications of hard science to communal life when I was abruptly interrupted by one of my committee members, who is also an incredibly successful researcher. She said, "Are you insinuating that the social sciences are soft?" I know my work is not soft. It's implementable, it's practical, and it has the potential to change lives. And so it was in that moment that I realized that my work is not based upon science, but synonymous with it. My name is Celeste Giovanni, and my research interests lie in science policy and the mobility of knowledges within the context of Canadian fisheries management. When I started my PhD, I knew that I cared about social impact and sustaining our oceans. My supervisors helped me put the pieces together by sending me out to Vancouver Island on a federal government grant, where the assignment was to interrogate the processes of fisheries management. When I got there, I had the privilege of sitting on different roundtable meetings. These meetings were premised upon the ideas of collaborative management. Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which is a federal institution, funds these meetings. They do this because their mandate includes to ensure that Canada's aquatic ecosystems and fisheries are sustainable and economically successful. So the roundtables on the west coast of Vancouver Island that I work with are geographically situated in the affected regions. They've hired a third-party facilitator who are responsible for engaging Indigenous groups, fisheries stakeholders, scientists, and civil servants to collaborate in the management of fisheries. Now, this is important because they bring vastly different knowledges into conversation with each other. In other words, the people who are impacted and impact the fisheries are given voice. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans historically did not want to relinquish their control on fisheries management. So essentially, fisheries policy across our entire nation was made in Ottawa. Scientists were stationed across the country to keep an eye on what was going on in the different regions, but there was no communal engagement. This style of management contributed to the East Coast cod collapse of 1992. This was a huge deal. I don't have time to get into it, so I won't go into detail, but the impacted coastal communities were absolutely devastated. The department took this as a lesson and then changed their style of management to engage Indigenous groups and fishery stakeholders across the country to consult on the management of their own specific regions. In other words, they gave people a seat at the table. Creating a space where different knowledge groups can explain their insights and why they believe those to be true is integral to the creation of effective policy. On the plane ride home, my mind was a sea of ideas. I was told sad stories, like one Indigenous person who told me that he used to be able to walk across streams on the backs of salmon because they were so plentiful. They explained an all-encompassing pain from the lack of salmon, not only from an economics perspective, but because this being is intrinsic to their worldview, their spirituality, and their way of life. There were happy stories, like a lodge owner telling me that when a certain plant blooms in his yard, it meant that the spring salmon would be returning. And then there were the technical stories, like scientists explaining best practices in hatcheries for optimal yield. But for me, it was all of these experiences together that created a story. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So what does this have to do with science policy? Well, science policy aligns communal need with scientific solutions. We use our skill sets to translate knowledge that is generally esoteric and technical into something that can be used more practically. So if fishery A must be closed for conservation, who has the authority to make that call? Some Indigenous groups in Canada have treaty rights to fisheries. Is fishery A one of these fisheries? Fishery A may be relied upon by fishers who need to feed their families. So how are we going to make sure that if we close fishery A, the economy of that coastal community will not collapse? Science can tell us what the natural state of fishery A is, but you need science policy experts to manage that reality in a way that maintains the people who rely on it. So let's bring this back. What is science policy and why is it important to society? Because it's mutually beneficial. We have our problems. Let's take the diminishing salmon returns. Scientists discover what's going on in nature. It builds us that basis of understanding. And then social scientists discover how to adapt that reality to lived experience. There isn't a dichotomy between the hard and soft sciences. Working in these silos will only contribute to events like the cod collapse. To achieve effective policy, we need to work in evolution with one another. Use our skill sets to complement each other, all for the greater good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celeste. Let's go to Brennan.
Thank you, Celeste, and thank you, Jeff. Also, thank you to Panch for being with us and sharing today on an issue that I feel very passionate about, and also to GW in Ottawa for organizing this event. My name is Brennan, and I'm a graduate student at GW's International Science and Technology program, and I'm studying tech management and also place-based innovation policy. And through this research, I'm constantly reminded of the crucial importance of building an inclusive science and technology engineering community. And this is a really exciting time because we're on the verge of finding science and technology solutions to many of the major issues the world is facing in security, health, energy, and more. And there's no clearer example of that than the COVID-19 pandemic and the science and technology response to that, including the accelerated vaccine response. But it's people who make science and technology happen. And it's crucial that we have a strong workforce, a pipeline with diverse backgrounds, perspectives, passions, a strong geographic spread of innovation policy and inclusivity. And that's why the missing millions that Panch mentions in his address is so crucial. And so in order to make this happen, it's very important that we make the science and technology workforce a very welcoming place for everyone. And in my research for UNESCO with Professor Vonortas and Connor Robb on how the US is faring on a number of science and technology indicators, it's clear that while we're making some progress on women and other underrepresented groups in science and technology, we're not making change fast enough. And we're not making it at the scale that we need to be in order for it to be as impactful as we need to address the world's problems. And that's why I really admire the work of Panch and of the Biden administration and their commitment to improving the speed and scale that we address this inclusivity issue. Right now, the science and technology workforce is only 30% women and only 13% people of color, which is much lower than the US workforce or the US population overall. And my research in innovation policy shows that there's a big geographic disparity in who's joining the workforce and being successful there. And so what we've learned about how we can address this challenge is that people need to be supported and that can be done through relationships, mentorships, allyship, which I've been really fortunate to have found at GW. And also partnerships between university and industry and government. So this needs to be a concerted effort and also a very conscious effort. And that's why conferences like this and also the SDG summit that's happening tomorrow that I know a lot of people will also be attending are so important, because this is where we grow our networks and our relationships, both between generations and, as we see from all the Americans and Canadians here, also across geographic divides. And this is especially important and also more challenging in this time of COVID. You know, we're all here virtually today. And we know that the COVID pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women and people of color and other vulnerable populations that are underrepresented in this field. So we're facing an uphill battle, but it's great to see the commitment of Panch and everyone else here to encourage the next generation of science and technology workers and building relationships with the next generation of students and researchers so that everyone can be welcome in this field and also picture a career and a future for themselves here. So as a young person and also as a woman, I'm very excited of what my generation and the next generation can accomplish and very inspired of where we are today. So with that, I feel very honored to be included here, and I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Thank you, Brennan. Well, I have to say that if Brennan and Celeste represent the future of science policy, I think we're in very good hands. Excellent comments, both of you. Thank you. So just a reminder, if you have questions, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. While you're doing that, I'll lead off with an initial question to Panch and then to our discussants. So Panch, you mentioned Dr. Vannevar Bush, and obviously last year we observed the 75th anniversary of his famous report, Science, the Endless Frontier, which laid out basically an implicit social contract whereby society provides funding to science, but leaves a high degree of autonomy to the scientific community in terms of how to spend that money. I'm wondering now, fast forward 75 years, we're seeing, a general decline in trust in institutions, in elites, and there are, some worrying signs of, the general public feeling that the scientists are elites, that they maybe aren't as ethical as they should be. There are general concerns about the pace of technology, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen the Biden administration, make some early steps, for example, appointing a first ever deputy director for science and society at the OSTP. I'm just wondering if we can comment on this general decline in trust, not only kind of the anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers, but just more generally, sort of the place of science in society, and whether there's an opportunity to sort of renew the social contract for science and innovation.
Thank you for asking that question, Jeff. Before I get started, I want to say I'm so thrilled to see Celeste and Brennan outline their ideas and how they have approached this. Truly inspirational. And as you rightly said, if we have Celeste and Brennan's inspired all across our both nations, I tell you, our future is fantastic. So let me start with that. So congratulations to both of them. What an amazing talent. And so we're very proud of you. So now to the question that you are at hand. You're right about the fact that, yes, there is some skepticism, but I'll tell you, the COVID moment has given us an opportunity, truly an opportunity to show, and I think people are recognizing that science and technology is showing the way, is leading the way. So we need to make sure that we take this moment and see how we can leverage this moment for positive feelings, positive thoughts, positive outcomes. What do I mean by that? I think we as scientists have also a responsibility, I believe, to communicate the value of science to society. And I would say, being a scientist myself and having been in academia, I feel an ownership and a responsibility to communicate the excitement of science, the impact of science, the importance of science. And all of that is for us as a responsibility. We need to do more also as a scientific community and not sit and wait for why we are not being acknowledged, why we are not being recognized. So that's one thing that needs to happen. The second thing, and more importantly, as you rightly said, I'm so excited by the Biden administration and for President Biden and Vice President Harris to emphasizing how science is the underpinning and the important element of our society, of democracy, of prosperity. And so I'm so thrilled. This is the moment for science. And I'm so excited by that. I'm excited by, the fact that a leading scientist like Dr. Lander is the science advisor to the president and a nominee for the OSTP director. I'm excited by the fact when you talked about Alondra Nelson as a deputy director, I talked to Alondra. Unbelievable talent. And that, that such talent is being tapped by the administration to focus on the future of what science and technology and engineering can do for our nation, for humanity, society, and the global prosperity makes me so excited, so excited. And so I think this is a moment for us to see how we can therefore work together, all of us. Everybody has a responsibility. Okay, NSF has a responsibility. I personally has a responsibility as a director, but also as a scientist. Every one of us have to do our share to lift the spirit and the importance of science everywhere across our nation. And Jeff, I will leave with this last thought. That is by opportunity. I think we owe this to our citizens of our nation. This opportunity and the excitement that they need to feel is because they feel impacted by that at a personal level. We need the STEM spirit and the STEM spark to permeate everywhere. And I know that we can get there. And I know I sometimes I get accused as you're an optimist. I will take that accusation because I think we can get it done. It's not just about optimism. I am a realist also at the same time. I know this can be done because we have a fantastic administration. And I said, we have also the bipartisan support in Congress. This moment and the COVID moment has shown us that the importance can be even underscored more for people to understand and relate to. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And as Gilles says in the Q&A, your enthusiasm is contagious, so appreciate that. Celeste or Brennan, any responses on the trust in society issue?
I can speak to it a tiny bit. So when it comes to trust, it's a really big deal because when we're talking about science and we're talking about mobilizing that knowledge to people who don't really understand necessarily how that knowledge has been produced. Right. There's an inherent trust that belongs in that bridging. So if you lose that trust, and that trust is generally, it's bridged from scientists to the public through policy, in my case, or through government. So when you're bridging that knowledge, you can't just expect people to trust you. Right? Like you have to have this history of building trust, building relationships with your end users or your community, whoever it's impacting, so that that trust can be built and then they will just trust you. So I think that it's a critical role of governments. I don't think it's an easy fix. I don't know if there is a 100% answer to the question, but it's kind of in going to grassroots communities, going to that level and engaging at that level, I think that you can give your ideas in a way that can be understood, not just listened to, but actually understood by those other people. And then they'll mobilize that knowledge for you as well. So I think that really creating that bridge is going to be essential to producing trust when it comes to dispersing science.
Okay, thank you. Brennan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that also on Celeste's point of speaking in a way that you're understood, I think that a lot of times when people from the science and technology community communicate outside of our sector, we sometimes use jargon and words that may be difficult to understand or may mean something different to someone who works in a science and technology field than they mean to a layperson. And sometimes that can lead to confusion and then distrust for reasons that are misunderstandings. And so one of the things that I think is very important when you're building relationships, which is obviously something, a theme that's coming out from tonight, is speaking in a way that is not condescending, but is also understandable and acknowledges the point of view that the audience and community that you're discussing with is coming from and the background knowledge that they have.
Absolutely, know the audience. And if you don't understand me, let me just speak louder. Well, we know that doesn't work. So thank you. Okay, let's get to some of the questions in the Q&A. So Panch, Ezra asked about knowing the differences between the US and Canada in terms of size, scale, and even culture. Canada seriously lags the US in business level R&D. Or business effort in R&D, and in terms of translating its world-class research into tangible benefits. So he asks, what would you recommend to Canadian policymakers to address these deficiencies?
Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, we have to understand that investment in basic research is an exceedingly important imperative for any nation that wants to be in the vanguard of not only competitiveness, but more importantly, national prosperity. And so continuing to invest in basic research and then providing the environments so that the basic research can then translate in ways that can then provide the societal and economic benefits is an exceedingly important thing. So continuing the investments to do that is exceedingly important. And as I said in my talk, partnership is exceedingly vital within Canada. In fact, in the days that when I was in Ottawa, Ottawa was this magical hub of technology, particularly, when we have Nortel, DNR, Newbridge, Mitel, and all of these companies emerging because it provided an ecosystem that just, it was just fueling, it's such that, it was just making sure that one it makes another possible, another makes another possible. And it became a highly, highly prosperous city. And so I think we need to make sure that we are continuing to recreate those kinds of things everywhere across both United States and Canada. And so that's what I would say. The next thing I would say is, and the last thing is, always focus on the uniqueness. When you talk about small or big is not the issue, is what you can do uniquely. To Brennan's point, which we both agree with, place-based innovations means you take that particular thing that makes that nation or that region or that state or that particular city great. And so use that as the seed corn of building the future. And so the more we do that, both nations, I think we will prosper into the future. And that's what I would say.
Thank you. And as you no doubt know, you have a super clusters initiative that is trying to focus on more place-based innovation. So thank you for that. Let's just go to the next question so we try to get as many of these in as we can. Ariel asks, what is the most common critique that NSF receives around its funding and EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusivity? And how is NSF responding to the critique?
Yeah. I think the general critique of NSF, having been a critic myself from the outside as a faculty member, is when you write a proposal and you're receiving a highly competitive and you don't get the funding. You get this kudos saying that you're reviewed, you got a highly competitive rating, but we had only so much funds and therefore we could not entertain your proposal. So this is something that I'm working really hard. And so that's why I'm so excited by the president's budget outline that he released on Friday, where there is this increased investments for science for NSF and other agencies, because we have so many wonderful ideas that are being left on the cutting floor, as cutting room, if you want, cutting floor. We cannot have that because we need to have these ideas actually realize the potential. And therefore the talent then becomes energized and enabled and then expresses itself. So I think I'm very happy about the fact that there is this moment right now that there is interest in wanting to invest more in science and engineering. And therefore, now, to your point that you left at the last point on EDI, therefore, now it is our responsibility. And that's why I've taken the COVID moment and said, how might we, to the point it was made by Brennan and Celestis, how might we then choose to invest in disproportionately affected individuals and disproportionately affected institutions across our nation? And the point it was made, and it's very, very important to me, many women have been taking care of families and elderly and doing the fantastic work that they are doing all at the same time. We have to be for them, with them, ensuring that their careers are energized even more. And that's also for people of color. We have to make sure that we do everything at NSF and as a nation. And I am deeply committed to that objective.
Excellent, thank you. Celeste or Brennan, any follow-up comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit on the women leaving the workforce and what a crucial problem that is right now, especially for women in science and technology, who at the time have this dual burden where they're hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, by increased household responsibilities. If they're a mother, increased responsibilities as a mother as well. But many of them are also on the forefront of the COVID-19 response as well. So they're not just trying to deal with their own personal difficulties because of the pandemic, but also trying to create solutions for the country or the world as a whole, especially if they're working on the vaccine response or other science and technology solutions to some of the problems that we're facing. So this is a really big burden that a lot of people in our community are facing right now. And I think that's very important that Panch has mentioned that we're addressing it and giving it a lot of attention.
Thank you, Brennan. Just in the interest of time, I think we'll just do one more question. Unfortunately, won't be able to get to all of the questions, but let me go to your old colleague Gilles Patry's question around global research collaboration, and consistent with the spirit of the Bromley event and the Canada-U.S. relationship. He asks, how can we foster and enhance research collaboration between our researchers?
Thank you so much for asking that question, Gilles. When I talked about folks like Jeff and Alejandro and you and I, we had the ability to be able to move back and forth between the nations in terms of graduate students being here and there. And I look at Celeste and Brennan, part of this ecosystem that is what we're talking about today. This is the kind of thing that we need to do more of. Is people in Canada having the opportunity to get trained in the United States getting folks getting trained in Canada. And this blend of these, the nations, the cultures, aspirations, all of that I think will make both nations richer in terms of societal terms, richer in terms of progress of both nations. We are great partners. We have always been great partners. And I'm so thrilled that Prime Minister Trudeau and President Biden have this strong relationship right off the start. And I know that we are going to build this. And so I'm committed. I've talked to Alejandro about this with ENSER. I'm also, with Mona Niemer, I've said, how might we build more bridge programs? How might we build more large centers that spans? How might we bring industry that transcends both of us? For example, a RIM or a Google on both sides transcend both nations. How might we bring them together and use them as a platform for further enhancing the partnership realm between us? And I'm so excited by our quantum investment, almost $1 billion in Canada. And we are putting a lot in quantum here in the United States. There is an area for us to do something really good. We have tremendous need for agriculture being inspired and made much more smart agriculture. You have the same. We can work together. So there are areas I think we can bring together to work together, Gilles. And I want to use this moment, if I could answer one more question, because my very dear friend Gregor Wolbrand for many years has asked this question. Gregor, I hear you. When I talk about inclusivity, Gregor, you know this from my own personal research. I am deeply, deeply committed for people with disabilities to be empowered, energized, that I call them, Gregor, you know this. I mean, you are the best example, Gregor, of not just a definition of disability. You have transcended that. You have shown what abilities can do, and you have shown that. You are a great example of what people with unbelievable abilities can do for humanity and society. So you can be rest assured that NSF will never stray away from that focus of working for and with individuals with disabilities to create better futures for all of us, Gregor. And you are a shining light, my friend. And I'm so happy you've joined this call here today.
Okay, thank you. And, this could go on, I'm sure, for hours. Lots of fascinating topics to talk about. Unfortunately, we do need to wrap up the discussion. So let me just say a huge thank you to Ponch and to Celeste and Brennan. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Elisa Ayers, just recently appointed Dean of the Elliott School of International Affairs at GW, who will be offering closing remarks. Dr. Ayers has a distinguished career, serving most recently as Senior Fellow for India, Pakistan, and South Asia at the Council of Foreign Relations. Previous to that, she served in the Obama State Department as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia. Dr. Ayers, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm just delighted to be able to join you, and I'm sorry that a prior commitment prevented me from being able to hear all of your conversation today, but I did catch the last half hour. I'm so happy that NSF Director Dr. Panchanathan has offered today's Bromley Memorial Keynote. Dr. Panchanathan, thank you for making time for us and for sharing your thoughts on inclusion in the science and engineering community. In honoring D. Allen Bromley, today's memorial event rightly highlights the dynamic and enduring bilateral S&T relationship that exists between Canada and the United States. And as witnessed today, the seamless interaction between US and Canadian researchers, students, and scholars continues to strengthen the knowledge ecosystems of both countries. Director Panchanathan's timely remarks underscored how we can better nourish our knowledge and research ecosystems by creating a more robust, inclusive community of science and engineering students, scholars, and practitioners. This is a mission and a commitment to inclusion that the Elliott School shares. The Elliott School, of course, will continue in its commitment to help create such an inclusive community as we strive for inclusive excellence and as we deepen our engagement with diversity and equity while growing our involvement in the STEM fields. So with that in mind, I would like to thank the University of Ottawa's Institute for Science, Society, and Policy, our own, the Elliott School's own Institute for International Science and Technology Policy, and of course, NSF Director Panchanathan for highlighting these important issues for us here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ayers, and that draws our program to a close. So thank you everyone for participating. We look forward to seeing you next year at the Bromley event again, and have a great evening. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Dr. Panchanathan. Thank you, Dean Ayers.
All right, well done.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.